Another live legal issue is whether or not there will be prosecutions for the violations of federal crime that we saw on tape today as these mobs broke glass and broke into the Capitol and ransacked and looted it to the extent that they could, and vandalized offices and assaulted police officers. Joining us now is our friend Ari Melber, who keeps an eye on the legal side of these things as well as so much else. Ari, I should tell you, at the top of the hour at 8 o'clock, we think we're going to hear remarks from Senator Mitch McConnell, so we'll keep an eye on that. I'll be looking to see whether or not he will be talking about meting out any sort of punishment against Republicans who have incited what happened today.
Yeah, Rachel, I mean, to the points you raised, number one, both houses of Congress, the House and the Senate, control whether and how to seat members and whether to remove members. The Constitution provides for expulsion. The House does it at a 2/3 vote, obviously a high bar, but it can happen. And we should note, with all of today's discussion on this sad day, of how far you have to go back to see the Capitol breach, this Capitol that we look at under nightfall tonight with Washington under curfew. Many of the expulsions that have occurred where the House has taken that extraordinary measure and voted to expel members were around deeming members disloyal in the context of the Civil War. 15 senators and 5 House members in total have been expelled. As for the other point you raised, I'll touch on it briefly, Rachel. When this scene was first breaking out, I, like many, was watching your breaking news coverage. You raised immediately the legal evidence on the ground that showed, it appeared, so many people breaking laws and then being treated with great leniency as they stormed the stairs. And so I'll point out for you and for viewers, there are several federal crimes here at issue. There's trespassing, obviously, going onto property in an unauthorized manner. There's entering what is called a restricted government building under federal law. That's any government building like this one where, for example, someone is appearing under Secret Service protection, in this case, Vice President Pence. That's a crime. If you enter that building with a deadly weapon or in a manner that leads to grievous bodily injury or death, that's a felony punishable up to 10 years if someone both enters that building unlawfully and then is linked to that conduct. There's also physical damage to property. So I know you were reporting late tonight on some U.S. attorneys speaking out on this. As a matter of federal procedure, there is evidence of a great many crimes committed today. The pictures we saw provide, on the one hand, a spectacle for the whole world to watch, which we've been covering, but on the other hand, in a very real way, this documentation, this journalism performed in real time, a sad day for America, also, I think, provides very legal evidence that could be used in future prosecutions, Rachel.
And what type of prosecutors are we talking about here? Obviously, you're describing federal crimes because we're talking about federal property here. But I was struck to see the U.S. Attorney in the Eastern District of Kentucky, the U.S. Attorney in the Northern District of Ohio, both of them Trump appointees, say if you traveled to D.C. from this district, from Eastern Kentucky, from Northern Ohio, to go cause these crimes, you will be prosecuted in this district. Are these prosecutions that would happen where you're from or where you committed the crime?
It's a great legal question, Rachel. I think door number one would be the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia. It would be the person with that local jurisdiction. And often those U.S. attorneys change as a matter of course with a new administration. Next year, the statute of limitations will be alive. So any of these could be pursued either now or later by the Justice Department and the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia based on where these possible crimes occurred. Again, as always, they would have to be investigated. There's a fair process for that. The other way, door number two, as you mentioned, is if there is conspiring or traveling across state lines, you could have a federal prosecution by someone in those other jurisdictions. Somebody planned a crime over here, and they went over there to Washington to commit it. Those are both options. I think it's fair to say that the precedent or the general practice would be first to try door number one out of D.C. But those were as well newsworthy and extraordinary statements by those other federal prosecutors.
And Ari, I should mention again that we are expecting comments from the Senate floor momentarily from Senate Majority Leader, the top Republican in the Senate, Mitch McConnell. He made strong comments today in opposition to the president and to the president's supporters trying to sabotage the counting of the Electoral College votes today. That was followed shortly thereafter by the insurrection that stormed the Capitol by force. And so when that happens, we'll go right to it. But Ari, let me also just ask you, one of the things that's interesting and unique and occasionally a political flashpoint about the district is the strictness of the firearms laws in the district. When the leader of the Proud Boys was arrested earlier this week, he was arrested in conjunction with having allegedly ripped that Black Lives Matter sign off a historic black church and set fire to it. But when he was arrested, he was found to be in capacity, according to the police, of high-capacity magazines for a firearm, and that led to additional charges against him. There was a lot of discussion online leading up to today that President Trump's supporters were going to try to get firearms and ammunition into the district. And we know that a woman was shot and, in fact, died of her wounds. She was shot inside the Capitol. We don't know the circumstances of her shooting. To what extent would the presence of firearms among this mob today potentially create legal problems, not just for the people who might be caught with firearms, but for other people who were involved, conspiring with them in a unified action when some of them were armed? Could that cause additional legal trouble?
Yes, if it's seen as part of a group action, the knowing and intentional conspiring to disrupt government business, that's the language in one of the statutes I mentioned, that then has grievous bodily harm or death. That changes from a misdemeanor, which is up to 1 year, to a felony that under current federal law is punishable by up to 10 years in prison. That's separate from any charges, of course, for direct violence, if an individual obviously attempted to harm or shoot or murder someone else. So all of that's very serious, Rachel. And the other legal point I wanted to mention, again, as we await the Senate coming back into session on this extraordinary and dark day, is something that you and Nicole and others have mentioned as I've been listening to our coverage. I just wanted to echo it. From what we've seen, and this is all breaking news, we've just been following it, but from what we've seen and the evidence we have, there is a tremendous and total law enforcement failure that occurred today. I have heard some people, some guests, and some members of Congress speak relatively careful about it. I understand the reasons for that. But from the evidence that I see, this was a planned, well-known, high-security, high-priority event. There was a total failure to secure the premises with a much smaller group of protesters than we've seen as compared to other events that have been handled much better. There was a leniency in the extreme in the handling of the initial risk as folks came to the barricades, and the consorting and the interaction we've seen and documented just in the early accounts that we have, some of the early videos, some of them from open source reporting, and we're going to continue to work on that. So there's obviously, from a legal and public policy perspective, Rachel, I think there's obviously warranted here an independent investigation, raising all the questions of, can the police or the feds investigate themselves? No. But it needs to have full independent powers to be credible. And it raises the question that you have in any time you have this kind of government law enforcement failure, which is, was this mere incompetence? Okay, they misunderstood the threat, they failed in multiple ways, and then we got the scenes we have. Or was there something malicious here? And that's a question I'm stating. We don't have the answers yet. But you'd need investigation of a governmental type, as well as the journalism that will continue to ask, did this many members of the Capitol Police and other federal law enforcement who were tasked with protecting an extraordinary meeting of the entire Congress, the vice president, et cetera, did they merely fail over and over incompetently? Or were there some who were in some way a party to this, in some way maliciously partaking? And those are questions that an independent investigation can tackle. Some of the videos that are already going around and some of the things we're tracking raise really disturbing questions about a total law enforcement failure. The last thing I'll say, given these images, were the heavy security you see now could have been instituted earlier in the day.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And, you know, the other images that we were just seeing, talking about journalism as being part of the accountability here and potentially part of the evidence, if any of these news images are used as part of prosecutions here, as you see the mob today attacking the equipment, attacking journalists, attacking the equipment left behind, in this case, by some AP camera crews. This is part of what happened today. It was the ransacking, attacking, and destruction of equipment from members of the media. And again, just let to happen. These are the journalists being run off from doing their jobs so that the mobs could take their stuff, break it, and celebrate their mob rule.
Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.